The first thing anyone noticed about Emma Martinez wasn't her cerebral palsy or her bright pink walker. It was her infectious laugh that could make strangers smile from 50 feet away. On that crisp Saturday morning in October, her laughter rang across Riverside Community Park like music as she navigated the paved walkway with newfound confidence, her small hands gripping the handles of her walker with determination that would make Olympic athletes envious. "Mom, look, I'm going so fast," Emma called out, her dark curls bouncing as she pushed forward with careful, measured steps. At 8 years old, she had been using her walker indoors for months, but today marked her first real adventure in the park, a milestone her mother, Sarah, had been planning for weeks. Sarah Martinez watched from a nearby bench, her heart swelling with pride as Emma maneuvered around a small group of pigeons who seemed utterly unbothered by the approaching pink mobility device. After countless physical therapy sessions, doctor visits, and Emma's own fierce determination, this moment felt like victory itself. The autumn sun filtered through the maple trees, casting golden light on what Sarah had already decided was going to be a perfect day. "You're doing amazing, sweetheart," Sarah called back, pulling out her phone to capture Emma's triumphant smile. She had already sent 3 videos to her sister in Phoenix, who had been following Emma's progress religiously. This was the kind of moment that made all the sleepless nights and medical bills worth it. But perfection, Sarah had learned through 8 years of motherhood and 3 years of navigating Emma's diagnosis, was often fragile. "Excuse me." The sharp voice cut through the peaceful morning air like a knife through silk. Sarah looked up to see a woman in her 50s marching toward them, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, her face twisted into an expression of indignation that seemed wildly disproportionate to the serene park setting. Emma had stopped her walker near the fountain, enchanted by the way the water caught the sunlight. She was completely absorbed in the simple joy of the moment, unaware of the approaching storm. "This is ridiculous," the woman announced, gesturing broadly at Emma as if she were a traffic obstacle rather than a child. "These walkways aren't meant for equipment. She's blocking the entire path." Sarah felt her stomach drop. The walkway was easily 12 feet wide, with plenty of room for Emma's walker and several adults to pass comfortably. But she recognized the tone. She'd heard it before in grocery stores, restaurants, and other public spaces. The tone that suggested Emma's very existence was somehow an inconvenience to the world. "I'm sorry, is there a problem?" Sarah asked, standing up from the bench and moving closer to Emma, every maternal instinct suddenly on high alert. "The problem," the woman said, her voice rising, "is that normal families can't enjoy this part because it's being taken over by people who should probably be somewhere more appropriate." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Emma had turned around now, her bright smile fading as she sensed the tension in the air. Her small hand reached instinctively for her mother, a gesture that had become second nature whenever the world felt unsafe. "This is a public park," Sarah said quietly, fighting to keep her voice steady. "My daughter has every right to be here." "Your daughter," the woman spat, "is disrupting everyone else's enjoyment. Look around, people are having to walk around her contraption. It's selfish." Sarah glanced around the park. The elderly couple was feeding ducks at the pond, completely absorbed in their own world. A jogger had passed by earlier with a friendly wave to Emma. 2 teenagers were taking selfies by the rose garden. Nobody seemed disrupted by anything except the woman now standing before them with her hands on her hips like an angry supervisor. "Her name is Emma," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength, "and she's not disrupting anything." What happened next would replay in Sarah's mind for months afterward, frame by horrifying frame. The woman, later identified as Linda Brennan, a regional manager for an insurance company, stepped forward with sudden, shocking aggression. Without warning, without hesitation, she placed both hands on Emma's shoulders and shoved. Emma stumbled backward, her walker catching on the uneven ground near the rose garden. She fell hard into the thorny bushes, her cry of pain and surprise piercing the morning air as the metal frame of her walker clattered against the stone border. For a split second, the world went completely silent. Then Sarah's maternal fury erupted like a volcano that had been building pressure for 8 years of fighting for her daughter's place in an often unwelcoming world. Sarah moved faster than she had ever moved in her life, reaching Emma in 3 quick strides as her daughter's sobs echoed across the suddenly quiet park. Blood was already seeping through Emma's yellow sweater, where the thorns had scratched her arms, and her left knee was badly scraped from hitting the stone border of the rose garden. "Baby, I'm here," Sarah whispered, carefully extracting Emma from the bushes while mentally cataloging every injury. Years of medical appointments had taught her to assess quickly. The cuts looked painful but not deep, though Emma's twisted ankle from the fall was already beginning to swell. "It hurts, Mommy," Emma whimpered, clinging to Sarah with trembling hands. "Why did she push me?" The question broke something fundamental inside Sarah's chest. Emma, despite all of her challenges, had maintained an unwavering faith in the basic goodness of people. Until now. I don't know, sweetheart, Sarah said, her voice remarkably steady as she lifted Emma away from the thorns. But we're going to make sure it never happens again. Behind them, Linda Brennan was backing away, her face pale as she seemed to realize the magnitude of what she had just done. I didn't mean, she just needed to move, and I barely touched. You assaulted my daughter. Sarah's voice cut through Linda's stammering excuse like ice. She turned to face the woman while keeping Emma protectively in her arms. You pushed a disabled child into rose bushes. Don't be so dramatic, Linda snapped, though her voice lacked its earlier confidence. She's fine. Kids are resilient. But Emma clearly wasn't fine. Blood was dripping from multiple scratches, and she was struggling to put weight on her left foot. More concerning to Sarah was the look in her daughter's eyes, a confusion and hurt that went far deeper than physical pain. Hey, are you okay? A jogger had stopped, pulling out earbuds as he approached. He was followed quickly by the elderly couple from the duck pond, their faces etched with concern and disbelief. I saw the whole thing, the jogger said, looking directly at Linda with disgust. Lady, what's wrong with you? This is none of your business, Linda replied, but her voice was shaking now. More people were gathering. A family with strollers, 2 teenagers who had been taking photos, even the park maintenance worker who had been emptying trash cans. The elderly woman, who introduced herself as Margaret Chen, knelt down to Emma's level. Sweetheart, can I help clean those scratches? I have some tissues and hand sanitizer in my purse. Sarah nodded gratefully, then pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I'm calling 911, she announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, including Linda. You can't be serious, Linda scoffed. It was an accident. A misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? The jogger stepped forward, his voice incredulous. I watched you deliberately push that little girl. There was nothing accidental about it. Same here, said one of the teenagers who was already filming with her phone. I got the whole thing on video. Posted it to TikTok already. It's got like 50 views in 2 minutes. Linda's face went white. Delete that immediately. Not happening, the teenager replied firmly. People need to see what you did. While Sarah spoke with the 911 dispatcher requesting both paramedics and police, Margaret Chen had gently cleaned Emma's wounds with practiced care. I'm a retired school nurse, she explained softly to Emma. These scratches are going to heal up just fine, honey. You're very brave. Emma managed a small smile through her tears. My walker's okay too, right? Sarah checked the pink walker, which had a few scratches but was structurally sound. It's perfect, just like you, she assured her daughter. The sound of sirens grew closer, and Linda Brennan's panic became increasingly obvious. She was pacing now, muttering to herself about lawyers and lawsuits, completely oblivious to the crowd of witnesses documenting her every word and movement. Officer Rodriguez arrived first, followed closely by the paramedics. He was a father himself, Sarah could tell immediately by the way his expression softened when he saw Emma's tear-streaked face and bandaged arms. I'm Officer Rodriguez, he said gently to Emma first, crouching down to her level. Can you tell me what happened, sweetheart? Emma looked to Sarah for permission, then spoke in a small but clear voice. The angry lady pushed me into the thorns because she said I was in the way. But I wasn't in anybody's way, was I, Mommy? No, baby, you weren't in anyone's way, Sarah confirmed, her voice breaking slightly. Officer Rodriguez stood and turned to the assembled crowd. I'm going to need statements from anyone who witnessed what happened here. I've got video, the teenager said immediately, stepping forward. Posted it online, but I saved the original too. Me too, said another bystander, holding up his phone. Caught the whole thing from when she started yelling. The jogger raised his hand. I saw it all from the beginning. That woman was aggressive and completely out of line. As the paramedics examined Emma's injuries and Officer Rodriguez began taking statements, Linda Brennan seemed to finally grasp the reality of her situation. She was no longer dealing with an isolated moment of bad judgment. She was facing potential criminal charges with multiple witnesses and video evidence. This is getting blown way out of proportion, she said desperately to Officer Rodriguez. I barely touched her. She fell because she can't balance properly. The officer's expression hardened. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop talking and listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Sarah watched as Officer Rodriguez read Linda her rights, Emma safe in her arms and surrounded by a community of strangers who had become protectors. For the first time since the attack, Sarah allowed herself to believe that justice might actually be possible. The emergency room at St. Mary's Hospital buzzed with quiet efficiency as Dr. Patricia Walsh examined Emma's injuries under the bright medical lights. Sarah held her daughter's hand while the physician carefully documented each scratch, scrape, and bruise with the methodical precision of someone who understood these records might end up in a courtroom. 13 puncture wounds from thorns on her arms and hands. Dr. Walsh dictated to the nurse. Severe abrasion on left knee, moderate swelling of left ankle, and multiple contusions consistent with a fall. She looked up at Sarah with kind but serious eyes. The good news is nothing requires stitches, but she's going to be sore for several days. The ankle sprain will need rest and elevation. Emma had been remarkably brave throughout the examination, asking questions about the medical instruments and even making the nurse laugh with her observation that the hospital gown made her look like a fancy ghost. But Sarah could see the exhaustion creeping in around her daughter's eyes, the kind of bone-deep tiredness that came from having your safe world suddenly turned upside down. "Mommy, can we go home now?" Emma asked as Dr. Walsh finished applying the last bandage. "Soon, sweetheart. Officer Rodriguez needs to ask us a few more questions first." The detective who joined them wasn't Officer Rodriguez, but Detective Maria Santos from the Special Victims Unit. She introduced herself with a gentle smile and immediately put Emma at ease, explaining that she specialized in cases involving children and vulnerable adults. "Emma, you did such a good job telling Officer Rodriguez what happened," Detective Santos said, settling into a chair at Emma's eye level. "Can you tell me if the lady said anything to you before she pushed you?" Emma's brow furrowed in concentration. "She said I was blocking the path and that I should be somewhere more appropriate. I don't know what that means." "Appropriate," Sarah corrected softly, her heart breaking all over again. "She was mean about my walker," Emma continued. "She called it a contraption. But it's not a contraption. It's my legs." Detective Santos nodded, making notes. "You're absolutely right, Emma. Your walker helps you walk, just like glasses help people see better." While Emma was distracted by a tablet the nurse had provided, Detective Santos turned to Sarah. "We've collected statements from 7 witnesses, plus multiple video recordings. The teenagers who filmed it have already shared it across social media platforms. It's gone viral. Over 2 million views in 6 hours. Sarah's stomach lurched. She hadn't considered that Emma's worst moment would become public entertainment. "Is there any way to take it down?" "Even if we could, copies are everywhere now. But honestly, Mrs. Martinez, this level of public attention might work in your favor. The district attorney's office is already aware of the case, and they're taking it very seriously." Detective Santos pulled out her tablet, showing Sarah a series of screenshots. "We've been investigating Linda Brennan's background. This isn't her first incident involving harassment of disabled individuals." The images showed email complaints, incident reports, and witness statements spanning 3 years. Linda had confronted a veteran with a service dog at a grocery store, complained to management about a wheelchair user taking up too much space in a restaurant, and had multiple documented altercations with parents of autistic children at various public venues. "She has a pattern," Detective Santos explained. What happened to Emma was just the most recent and most documented escalation. Sarah stared at the evidence, feeling sick. How many families has she hurt? Too many. But Emma's case is different. We have video evidence, multiple witnesses, and clear physical injuries. The DA is considering charging her with assault on a disabled person, which carries enhanced penalties under state law. The detective's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. Linda Brennan just lost her job. Her employer saw the viral video and terminated her immediately. They're also cooperating fully with our investigation." "What kind of work did she do?" Sarah asked. "Regional manager for Pinnacle Insurance. She was responsible for evaluating disability claims." Detective Santos shook her head in disgust. The irony is staggering. A soft knock on the door interrupted them. A tall woman in a navy suit entered, carrying a leather briefcase and radiating the kind of quiet confidence that came from winning difficult battles. "Mrs. Martinez, I'm Catherine Walsh from the Disability Rights Legal Center. I saw the video online and I'd like to discuss representation for you and Emma, if you're interested." Sarah looked between the detective and the attorney, feeling overwhelmed. "I don't understand. Representation for what?" "Criminal charges are just the beginning," Catherine explained gently. "What happened to Emma was a hate crime targeting her disability. You have grounds for a significant civil lawsuit that could provide compensation for her medical expenses, pain and suffering, and future therapy needs. More importantly, it sends a message that this behavior has real consequences." Emma looked up from her tablet. "Are you going to help us make sure the mean lady doesn't hurt other kids?" Catherine smiled, crouching down to Emma's level. "That's exactly what we're going to do, sweetheart. We're going to make sure she understands that children like you deserve respect and protection." Detective Santos' phone rang and she stepped aside to answer. When she returned, her expression was grim but satisfied. That was the DA's office. They're filing charges tomorrow morning. Assault on a disabled person, endangering the welfare of a child, and disorderly conduct. Linda Brennan will be arrested at her home at 7 a.m. Sarah felt a wave of vindication mixed with exhaustion. "What happens now?" "Now we build an airtight case," Detective Santos said. "The park has security cameras that captured everything from multiple angles. We're collecting those recordings tomorrow, along with formal statements from all witnesses. Catherine Walsh pulled out her business card. And I'll be filing a civil suit within the week. Mrs. Martinez, I want you to know that you and Emma won't be fighting this alone. The disability rights community has been waiting for a case like this, one with clear evidence and a sympathetic victim who can articulate the impact of these actions. Emma had fallen asleep in the hospital bed, her small hands still clutching Sarah's. Looking down at her daughter's peaceful face surrounded by bandages and bruises, Sarah made a decision that would change both their lives. I want to do this, she said quietly. Not just for Emma, but for all the other children like her who might cross Linda Brennan's path. She needs to understand that our kids aren't obstacles to be moved. They're people who deserve dignity. Detective Santos nodded approvingly. Justice for Emma and protection for others. That's exactly what we're going to deliver. Outside the hospital window, the sun was setting over the city, but for the first time since that morning's attack, Sarah felt like they were moving toward the light. The courtroom was packed on the morning of Linda Brennan's arraignment, with disability rights advocates filling the gallery alongside local reporters and curious onlookers drawn by the viral video that had now reached 15 million views. Sarah sat in the front row with Emma, who had insisted on attending despite her mother's concerns. I don't want to see the judge tell her she was wrong, Emma had declared that morning, adjusting her pink walker with newfound determination. The past 2 weeks had transformed her daughter in ways Sarah was still processing. Emma had gone from a shy child who apologized for taking up space to a fierce little advocate who wanted to face her attacker directly. Linda Brennan entered the courtroom flanked by 2 attorneys, looking nothing like the aggressive woman who had terrorized Emma at the park. Her blonde hair hung limp around her shoulders, and her expensive suit couldn't hide the hollow look in her eyes. The viral video had destroyed her life with surgical precision. Job terminated, social media accounts deleted after receiving thousands of angry messages, and according to Catherine Walsh, her husband had filed for separation 3 days earlier. Your Honor, District Attorney Rebecca Chen addressed Judge Martin Reeves. The state is charging Ms. Brennan with assault on a disabled person in the first degree, endangering the welfare of a child, and disorderly conduct. We have overwhelming evidence, including multiple video recordings and 7 eyewitness testimonies. Judge Reeves, a grandfather of 4 who was known for his no-nonsense approach to cases involving children, reviewed the file with a deepening frown. Ms. Brennan, I've watched the video evidence. Can you explain to me what possessed you to push an 8-year-old child with cerebral palsy into rose bushes? Linda's lead attorney, Marcus Webb, stood quickly. Your Honor, my client is having a difficult day and made an error in judgment. She's deeply remorseful and seeks the court's mercy. Error in judgment? Judge Reeves's voice carried barely contained anger. Mr. Webb, your client deliberately targeted a disabled child because she felt the child didn't belong in a public space. This court has seen the evidence of Ms. Brennan's pattern of harassment toward disabled individuals. This wasn't an error. It was a hate crime. Emma squeezed Sarah's hand as Linda was formally charged, and bail was set at $50,000. As they left the courthouse, they were surrounded by reporters and disability advocates who had traveled from across the state to show support. Emma, how do you feel about today? A reporter asked, kneeling down with her microphone. Emma looked directly into the camera with surprising poise. I feel happy because the judge said I belong in the park just like everyone else. And I want other kids like me to know that mean people can't push us around anymore. The clip would be played on every major news network that evening. Meanwhile, Catherine Walsh's civil lawsuit was moving forward with devastating efficiency. Linda's former employer, Pinnacle Insurance, had provided internal emails showing her bias against disability claimants, including several cases where she had denied legitimate claims that were later overturned on appeal. We're seeking $3 million in damages, Catherine explained to Sarah during a strategy meeting. Medical expenses, pain and suffering, future therapy costs, and punitive damages to send a message. But more importantly, we're demanding policy changes at public venues to better protect disabled individuals. The community response had been overwhelming. The local chapter of United Spinal Association had organized a Walk with Emma event at Riverside Park, drawing over 2,000 participants. Emma had led the procession in her pink walker. Beaming as children and adults with various disabilities marched behind her, many carrying signs reading Emma's Army and Dignity for All. 3 weeks after the initial incident, Linda Brennan stood before Judge Reeves for sentencing, having pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. The courtroom was again packed, but this time Emma wasn't just an observer. She was scheduled to give a victim impact statement. Your Honor, Emma said into the microphone that had been adjusted to her height, her voice clear and strong. The lady hurt my body, but she also hurt my feelings. She made me think I was bad for needing my walker. But I'm not bad. I'm just different, and different is okay. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom as Emma continued. I forgive her because my mom says forgiveness makes your heart feel better. But I hope she learns that kids like me deserve to be treated nice. Judge Reeves wiped his own eyes before addressing Linda directly. Ms. Brennan, you attacked a child whose only crime was existing in a public space while disabled. You have shown a pattern of targeting some of our community's most vulnerable members. This court sentences you to 6 months in county jail, 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, specifically with disability organizations, mandatory anger management and sensitivity training, and restitution of $50,000 to the victim's family. He paused, letting the weight of the sentence sink in. Furthermore, you are permanently banned from Riverside Park and all city recreational facilities. If you violate these terms, you will serve the maximum sentence of 3 years in state prison. Linda Brennan began to cry as the bailiff approached with handcuffs, finally seeming to understand the full consequences of her actions. As they left the courthouse that day, Emma looked up at her mother with bright eyes. Mommy, do you think she'll be nicer to other kids now? Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand. I hope so, sweetheart. And if she's not, there are laws now to protect them, partly because of how brave you were. The civil case would settle 2 months later for $2.8 million, with Pinnacle Insurance also agreeing to implement comprehensive disability sensitivity training for all employees and to review their claims denial practices under independent oversight. But the real victory, Sarah realized as she watched Emma confidently navigate the courthouse steps with her walker, wasn't measured in dollars or jail time. It was measured in the strength her daughter had found and in the countless other disabled children who would grow up in a world where Emma Martinez had proven they couldn't be pushed around. 1 year after the incident that changed their lives, Sarah Martinez stood at the newly installed accessibility information kiosk at Riverside Community Park, watching Emma lead a group of children with various disabilities through the park's expanded adaptive playground. The settlement money had funded not just Emma's ongoing therapy, but a complete transformation of the park that would benefit countless families for generations to come. Mrs. Martinez, the reporter from Channel 7, is here for the anniversary interview called Catherine Walsh, who had become more than Emma's attorney. She was now a close family friend and co-founder of the Emma's Dignity Foundation, a nonprofit organization that had already helped 12 families fight discrimination cases across 3 states. Emma spotted the news crew and waved enthusiastically, her confidence a stark contrast to the frightened child who had been pushed into the thorns. At 9 years old, she had become an unexpected spokesperson for disability rights, speaking at schools, community events, and even testifying before the state legislature on proposed accessibility legislation. Mommy, can I tell them about Linda's letter? Emma asked as she approached with her walker, now decorated with rainbow stickers and a small bell that chimed softly as she moved. Sarah smiled. The letter had arrived 6 months into Linda Brennan's community service sentence, handwritten and tear-stained, containing what appeared to be genuine remorse and a detailed account of Linda's own childhood trauma that had warped her understanding of difference and vulnerability. Emma had insisted they frame it alongside her collection of positive messages from supporters around the world. If you want to share it, that's your choice, sweetheart, Sarah replied. It's your story to tell. The interview began with Emma confidently explaining how the park had changed. Where once there had been traditional playground equipment that excluded many children, now there were wheelchair-accessible swings, sensory play areas for children with autism, and wide, smooth pathways perfect for walkers, wheelchairs, and other mobility devices. The best part, Emma told the reporter, is that kids who used to watch from the sidelines can now play with everyone else. That's what I wished for when I was in the hospital, that no other kids would have to feel left out. The impact extended far beyond Riverside Park. Emma's case had sparked a nationwide conversation about disability rights and public accessibility. The video of her victim impact statement had been viewed over 50 million times, with educators using it to teach empathy and inclusion in classrooms across the country. Linda Brennan had completed her jail sentence in community service, spending her required hours working at the Regional Disability Services Center, where she had undergone a remarkable transformation. Her supervisor, Maria Santos, the same detective who had investigated Emma's case, reported that Linda had become one of their most dedicated volunteers, working with disabled adults on job training and advocacy skills. I can never undo what I did to Emma, Linda had written in her letter, but I can spend the rest of my life making sure other children with disabilities are treated with the respect and kindness I failed to show. Emma's courage in forgiving me has changed my heart in ways I didn't think were possible. Sarah had been skeptical of Linda's transformation until she witnessed it firsthand at the Disability Center, where Linda was helping a young man with Down syndrome practice job interview skills with infinite patience and genuine warmth. Some changes, Sarah realized, were more profound than punishment. The Emma's Dignity Foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations, receiving donations from major corporations and celebrities who had been moved by Emma's story. They had successfully lobbied for stronger hate crime penalties targeting disabled individuals, funded accessibility improvements in dozens of public spaces, and provided legal support for families facing discrimination. Emma's own journey had been remarkable. Her physical therapy had progressed to the point where she could walk short distances without her walker, though she still preferred it for longer outings. More importantly, her emotional resilience had blossomed into natural leadership abilities that amazed everyone who met her. "I used to hide when people stared at me," Emma told a reporter during their interview. "Now I wave and say hello because maybe they just don't know any kids like me. Most people are nice when you give them a chance." As the interview concluded, Sarah reflected on how completely their lives had changed. She had left her part-time job as a bookkeeper to run the foundation full-time, traveling the country to speak about disability rights and inclusion. Emma had been invited to meet with legislators, appear on national television shows, and even received a humanitarian award from the United Nations Children's Fund. But perhaps the most meaningful change was visible every Saturday morning at Riverside Park, where the Emma's Angels playgroup met. Dozens of children with various disabilities played together on equipment designed for everyone, their laughter filling the air just as Emma's had on that fateful morning a year ago. "Mommy," Emma said as they watched the children play, "do you think Linda would be proud of how many friends I've made?" Sarah looked down at her daughter, whose capacity for forgiveness and hope continued to astound her. "I think she would be, sweetheart. And I think she'd be grateful that something so beautiful grew from something so ugly." Emma nodded thoughtfully, then brightened as she spotted a new family approaching the playground, a father pushing his young son in a wheelchair, both looking uncertain about whether they belonged. "Come on," Emma called to them with her characteristic enthusiasm, her walker chiming as she headed over to welcome them. "I'm Emma, and this is the best playground ever. Want me to show you around?" As Sarah watched her daughter effortlessly make the newcomers feel welcome, she realized that Emma had achieved something far more valuable than justice or financial compensation. She had transformed a moment of cruelty into a movement of kindness, proving that sometimes the smallest voices could create the biggest changes. The mean lady who had pushed Emma into the thorns had inadvertently pushed her toward a destiny as a champion for others, and the world was immeasurably brighter because of it.